Okay, so let's do the Derek Chauvin trial.
Yeah. So are you recording?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. So yeah, the Chauvin trial, as the world knows, is where the police officer allegedly killed George Floyd during a stop. Well, basically, Craig, I don't know how much you know of this. I have been keeping up with the trial, but and some people just don't really know the full facts. That's why the trial is so interesting. But what happened was George Floyd and another two people that were in the vehicle with him went into Cup Foods in Minneapolis. The clerk uh, who has given testimony in the case, on like in the early days of the case, has given testimony that he saw that the bill was counterfeit. He then went out to the vehicle to question Floyd. They knew Floyd. They, said, "Can you come make this right?" And I believe there was a refusal at that point for them to come back in and make it right with the store. They went in to buy cigarettes and they passed a $20 counterfeit bill. And so the manager of the store then calls the police. So this is how this all came about. Chauvin was not the first officer on the scene. Chauvin actually was called to the scene when the dispatcher heard a scuffle in the background on the radio. And as you know, I was a dispatcher for 15 years. That's very common. If you hear a scuffle, sometimes the officers they can't talk, but they only have a second to hit their radio button. And you hear the scuffle taking place in the background, you know where those officers are, and you direct more units to the scene. So the dispatcher has testified that she directed more units to the scene, and that's when Chauvin turned up. Now, they did, the checks. We're not going to go into the whole case here because most people know about it. But they did the checks, and then when they arrested Floyd, and when they were trying to put him in the vehicle, he was, I don't know if you want to classify it as resisting, and that's not the point here. Somehow he ended up on the other side of the vehicle on the ground in a hold. And Chauvin,
Is this federal or is it state?
this is city.
So you can watch the trial? I'm sorry, I'm not keeping up with it at all.
Oh, the trial. Yes.
Um,
Oh, goodness. Yes, Craig. It's on Court TV. And at Court TV right now, I have spoken to people around the world that are watching the trial. They're watching it in the UK. They're watching it in Australia. They're watching it everywhere. It's being viewed everywhere.
and is the
Because
trial completed and now they're waiting for the jurors to come back?
no. The evidence is still being presented, which is, the evidence is interesting because, you've got the prosecution that are arguing that because of Chauvin having his knee on the neck and cutting off his airway, restricting his airflow, led to his death. But then the defense is arguing that there was such a high level of fentanyl and methamphetamine in his bloodstream that he overdosed. So those are the arguments, and it's a really great trial. It's fun for me. I say fun, I mean, I hate that this has happened, but I really enjoy the legal arguments because, as you know, I did a law degree. I was going to be a barrister, but then my soul had other plans for me, and now I'm dispatching for the spirit world. But with all of that taking place and all this evidence being presented to the jury, now they do have 15 jurors. They have 3 stand-ins, but for the purposes of this remote viewing, we remote viewed the 12 that will be making the decision. Now, if it changes and, one of the jurors is dismissed or cannot continue, and then one of the stand-ins comes in, we'll take out the juror and we'll remote view the stand-in. So it's really interesting. And it's like, with all of this information, what does the jury think? Because this is like a trial by YouTube. The witnesses had videoed the event. The crowd was getting, not hostile. I mean, the defense puts it across as hostile. I mean, as a dispatcher, I've seen hostility that was quite mild compared to the riots that I've seen in London. And you know, as a dispatcher watching it on CCTV, but nonetheless, it was unsettling for the officers. So a lot of people filmed it. There's also the body cam footage of the officers, and there's also the CCTV. And what concerns me the most as a dispatcher, right, is the fact that, and I'm not making excuses for anyone here, but the fact that as a dispatcher, if I was watching that live on CCTV, and I saw that hold and I saw that something wasn't right, first of all, you know, there should be a sergeant in that dispatch room. The sergeant, if he has to leave, he or she has to leave the room for any reason, they take the radio with them. So if things go bent, they come straight back in, but they're always listening to the radio. And what I don't understand is why nobody in authority, sergeants, lieutenants, they had a whole CCTV room with a lieutenant sitting there. Why is it that nobody directed him to release that hold? So that's my big question. I'm like, okay, why, you know, because I've been in the CAD room. I've seen it. I've had to have sergeants and lieutenants stand behind me. Well, in England, they're called inspectors, but stand behind me, and they've made decisions, crucial decisions, even though they're not on the scene with the officers, they're watching it on CCTV. And it's like, you know, Liz, tell them to, you know, cancel the foot chase, cancel the vehicle pursuit. It's too dangerous. So when something is too dangerous, the sergeants and the lieutenants or inspectors, whoever's in charge of all of these officers, because he's not a sergeant, Chauvin's not a sergeant, right? Just because he's an FTO, a field training officer, does not mean he has the authority to call, you know, things like a sergeant can. So I can't understand for the life of me why all these people in authority were watching what was going on the CCTV and nobody told him to release that hold. So that's all I'm going to say about it.
Is he going to be found guilty?
Yes. So I remote viewed the, yes. And yes, he is. And they're going to make an example out of him. He will be, what my prediction is when I remote viewed it, is he will be found guilty of third-degree murder, and he will receive the maximum sentence, which is 25 years. And so that's my prediction. Now, you've also got this.
How is he feeling about it? Is he worried? Is he already let it go? Like his life is over?
Oh my
Even
God,
if he was found not guilty, I mean, his life is over, you know?
Well, it's over. I mean, you know, it's pretty much over anyway. I mean, he'll never be able to work as a police officer again. And, you know, everybody knows who he is. I'm sure he's been threatened to no end, including the defense lawyer is also being threatened. And what is so interesting about this case as well, and, you know, I'm not taking sides here, but you have to give the defense credit where credit is due. There's 14 lawyers on the prosecution team, and there's one guy on the defense. And so while the prosecution has all their little experts coming in, you know, expert questioning, expert counsel. So I've noticed that, you know, they have one prosecutor that's in on the medical stuff, and they have another prosecutor that's in on the you know, the police procedure, and another prosecutor that's in on something else. The guy on the defense, you have to give him credit if you're looking at it from a legal argument standpoint. And, you know, you have to remember that all this is theater. It's theatrical, right? It's who can put the best point across and persuade the jury in a theatrical way. And you have to give the defense credit. He's on his own, and he's doing it all by himself. And he's doing a good job. He's doing a good job. And he hasn't made anybody like feel threatened or feel stupid. It's the way he does his questioning is very skillful, very artful. And he ends up having, so what happens is, so for instance, you have people coming in and they're testifying for the prosecution. They're the prosecution witness. And then, excuse me, the defense rolls in and he starts questioning them, but he does it in such a way like, would you agree that at this still picture that I'm showing you, Chauvin's knee is not on his neck, it is on his shoulder blade? Yes, I would agree. So he's very skillful. And so I wanted to see how the jury are reacting to so much information, because it is overwhelming, the amount of
And
information.
you deep mind probed all the jurors?
Yeah. I did 12 remote viewing sessions where I deep mind probed the jurors. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So
So,
if you could put money on it, you put money on that he's gonna be found guilty and then he's gonna be made an
yeah.
example of, and that's it. Is he worried? Can you deep mind probe the what's his name?
Chauvin. Yeah. You know what? He thinks he's going to get away with it. As in, he feels like he is not guilty. He
Of
feels like
course
he
not,
is
or else he
being
wouldn't have gone to trial.
right. But, you know, even
He has the
people
right.
that know that they're guilty still try to say that they're not guilty just to get off. I mean, you know, most people say that they're not guilty. But for him, he feels that he's being made a scapegoat for the police department, for several failings of the police department. Now, I can actually, based upon what we just said a moment ago about how come all these sergeants and lieutenants and the dispatcher, as a dispatcher, I would have stepped in. But, you know, as I have many years as a dispatcher, but as a dispatcher, I would have stepped in and said, okay, you need to adjust your hold.
Yeah.
I would have immediately stepped in. I have actually canceled foot pursuits. I have actually canceled vehicle pursuits before, because when you're running a vehicle pursuit, you're constantly getting updates. So that the officers are giving you, okay, I'm turning right onto Main Street. Traffic is light. I'm going 20 miles per hour. Now, if he says I'm turning right onto Main Street, it's a Sunday afternoon. Church is just let out. There's 8 churches on Main Street. All these people are on the sidewalk or on the pavement, or they're getting into their vehicles, and you have a vehicle pursuit that's going on in a 20-mile-per-hour zone, and they're flying through, they're doing 80, I would cancel that pursuit. It's far too dangerous. It is not worth that car plowing into a crowd of churchgoers and killing innocent people. It's just not worth it. So as a responsible dispatcher, I would have called that hold off. I would have called off the vehicle. You know what I mean? So you do have that power.
All right. Is there anything else to add on the whole case, as far as the remote viewing of the jurors, or the remote viewing of, or the deep mind probe? Is there anything, any insightful data?
Well, I mean, if you want to look at it from a CTT, consciousness transformation techniques, and this may be going in way too deep for people, but on a CTT level, they're soulmates. Chauvin and Floyd are soulmates. They have had many lifetimes, where past lives, where they have killed one another. But the pattern seems to be, that I noticed looking at the most recent lifetimes, was that Floyd always has to overcome some sort of addiction. He's given himself a time limit to do so. If he hasn't succeeded on that life soul lesson, Chauvin comes along and kills him. So for it's crazy, right? So for instance, the last lifetime, it's cast, right? But it
This
gets
is what you
worse.
should have led with. So continue the last lifetime.
Mm. So it's crazy, right? So the last lifetime, they were both white males. It was probably around the 30s, 20s, 30s. It's early on. And
In the 1930s.
yeah. And like the cars look old, right? And Floyd is an alcoholic. He is coming out. He steps off the sidewalk into the street, and he stumbles, because he's not paying attention. He's really, really drunk. And Chauvin comes along in the car and accidentally kills him. Now, at that point, it was an accident, and Chauvin was, questioned, but nothing happened. So, what we've learned from the CTT is that in every subsequent lifetime, if you don't learn that life lesson, it gets worse and worse and worse. And they're actually soulmates in order to bring about these life lessons. So
Okay,
isn't that interesting?
so with Chauvin though, Derek Chauvin, I mean, not to take away from Floyd's death, but
Right.
so Chauvin in comparison this is torture. He's a national embarrassment. Everyone is
Mm-hmm.
looking at him. You know, it's like his pain is just beginning. He's a police officer going to jail. I mean, you can compound his problems, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to a degree where no one would want to beat him, whereas you know a quick death. So what is Chauvin's previous lifetime? Why is sure he killed him and he was meant to kill him, but why is this embarrassment? Why is this becoming like what is he supposed to kill him in a some
Mm.
sort of lesson that he's supposed to overcome? Because
Oh
you said
yeah.
previous well, you said it was an accident the last time.
Well, it's an accident this time.
Oh, right.
Listen, if you're looking at, let's go into the legal argument. Okay. My law professors should be very proud of me that I remember this stuff. The mens rea, it's a Latin term for the mental intent. And the actus reus is the actual act. So your mental intent has to line up with the actual act. Did Chauvin mentally intend to kill Floyd? No, no. But in Minnesota, you have the charge of third degree murder. And that's in like a handful of states. Most of the other states are manslaughter. So if it was any, isn't that funny? Isn't that funny that this took place in a state which has a third degree murder charge? Most other states have first degree, second degree manslaughter,
Manslaughter.
right? So
Yeah.
if this was outside Minnesota and in a regular state, it would be manslaughter, which doesn't carry a significant amount of time as compared to the third degree murder. But to make things interesting, we're talking about the CTT here, the consciousness transformation techniques, which is a system that we do. And when you're talking about the CTT, their souls picked for this to take place in a state with a third degree murder charge. Why didn't it take place in Texas? Because that's where Floyd was from. No, Floyd moves to Minneapolis and it takes place there where a third degree. So think about because the soul lessons are all about how we process our emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you think about all of the emotions that Chauvin is going through right now. I'm sure he's scared. I'm sure he knows he's a hated man.
What's the lesson he's supposed to overcome if it's an accident that he's killing Floyd over and over? What is he supposed to do?
So the lesson he's supposed to overcome is to learn that he's not a bad person. Inside.
Does he feel like he's a bad person if he feels like he's innocent?
So you've got a whole disconnect between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So the conscious mind is saying, you know what, I'm innocent, I'm being made a scapegoat, blah blah blah, right, of the police department. I'm being made a scapegoat. This is the hold is actually in the training manuals. The defense showed the training manuals, right? So but once convicted, think about all of those emotions that he is going to go through, knowing that he's a murderer and that he's going to have to come to terms with the fact that he's a murderer, and he's going to have to come to terms with the fact that everybody hates him, and he's going to have to come to terms with the fact that he's tarnished the police reputation. And and think about everything that's coming about. I mean, it wasn't just America where the protests happened. When this thing happened with Floyd, my former colleagues in England are like, why the hell are they protesting Black Lives Matter? in London, when we don't even have these scenarios here. And you know, I have family in Australia, and you know, I saw them posting on Facebook and other Australians like, why the hell are we protesting about Floyd's death in Sydney and in Melbourne when, you know, it's nothing to do with us? So protests broke out around the world. That's why the world is watching this case. And these 12 jurors are sitting there being absolutely bombarded with information. And I have to say,
Yeah,
the
no.
defense is doing a good job. I would, if I was on the jury, I wouldn't know what to think. And so that's why I remote viewed. I was like, I got to remote view these guys. This is so interesting.
All right, is there anything else to add before we go on to the next one? Any insight? I'm
Um,
curious to see. Okay, how about this? I have a question for you actually before we
okay.
drop it. Can we do another lifetime? So you were able to see the one in the 30s. Can we go back? You said it was many lifetimes, right? Can we do one more and visit Floyd and Chauvin?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So what goes in, I'm pulling up another lifetime here where Floyd is actually the perpetrator, and Chauvin and what's so funny is I'm looking at both of them in this lifetime. Floyd is black, they're tribal, and Chauvin is black. So the fact that this, you know, they in this lifetime they decided to add, so in all the other lifetimes they were always the same race, but in this lifetime they switched it up where Chauvin is the white police officer and Floyd is the, you know, the black man that was killed by the police. Now I have actually channeled George Floyd, which he hung around my house a couple of days after I channeled him. He's a big guy. I ain't gonna lie. His shadow was kind of peeping around my corners, and that happens sometimes when you're doing channeling and you're doing readings. You know, the energy, they have so much to say. Floyd's energy is really strong. He has a lot to say, and he was staying. You know, he was hanging around my house, and I finally was like, "Hey, mate, I'm sorry, you can't stay here." But I channeled Floyd because, you know, the spirit world will tell you how they died. I've worked on many homicide cases. I've worked on many mysterious death cases
How did
for
he die?
detectives.
Was he strangled or was it an overdose?
So it's a the drugs, and he also had a 90% blockage in one of his arteries, and he had heart issues, right, from all the drug use. He had blood pressure problems. This has all come out in the trial, but the actual cause of death is the hold that Chauvin had on him.
Hmm. And did he
Yeah.
say anything significant that's worth spreading on for anyone viewing?
He says he's going to change the world.
That his death will change the world.
His death will change the world.
And he sees up the timeline that that's the case, or he's just hopeful.
No. That's of the case. The police departments are going to review their policies and procedures, their holds. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. He's definitely going to change the world.
Oh,
Yeah,
all right, I think that
definitely.
was
So
good.
let's talk about the jury quickly.
Oh, okay.
What is interesting with some of these jurors is the fact that their minds are made up. So most of them are not. Most of them are not. But this
Is there
one,
anyone who's like, oh, he's not guilty?
no, there's no one that says he is not guilty. That as of yet, so I've done a profile on each juror. So this is interesting. This juror identifies as a black male. He is a black male. He also is an immigrant or has immigrant parents. Now, he is yet to make up his mind about the case. This is as of Friday, which is April 9th, after the closing of the court that day. And he did see some of the Floyd camera footage prior to the case, but not all of it. And he likes being there. He likes being on the jury. He has no legal background. He is not a white collar professional, but there is an indication that he is in a professional trade, as in it's probably, you know, something like mechanical or plumbing or electrician or something like that. And the fact that he is a black male, Nothing is definitive for him. He's not leaning towards guilty or not guilty, and he honestly has no idea how he will decide. Now, this is a female that I viewed. She's a mixed race female. I feel like she's older, and there is some indication that she is possibly not American born, or there's some sort of immigration there, like maybe with the parents or grandparents. She is not a white collar professional, and she is a news junkie. She watched the videos before the case, all of them. She was completely glued to the television when the incident took place, and she sat there for days in horror and shock and disbelief. And she is above, I would say she's definitely above average intelligence, despite being glued to the news. Because, you know, when does the news ever really report the truth? I mean, even as you're watching this case, you're watching the YouTube footage and the Facebook footage from the witnesses, but then you're looking at the police body cam footage, which shows a whole different angle. It's very strange, you know. There's a lot of information, but this one, she's funny. She reads a lot of crime books, and she loves to read before she goes to sleep. She has this chair that she likes to sit in when she does her reading. It has like flowers on it, and her home is quite simple with a lot of plants. She is a mother. She's not a stay-at-home mom, but she does work part-time, and she has no idea what to think about the case. Now, this is as of Friday afternoon closing of court. We are now Sunday, April the 11th, but she's not leaning in either direction. She's very confused about who to believe, and the amount of evidence is completely overwhelming for her. And even though she is enjoying the case, after about an hour, it becomes way too much for her. She loses information. She's no longer absorbing that information, and she's not actively taking notes to hold her attention. She doesn't like drugs. She doesn't drink, but she does like to gamble. So that's interesting. I pulled up another juror here. This
Well,
juror,
we already know that they're gonna vote guilty, as
yeah,
you
I mean,
pointed out.
but it's funny because
So
their current mindset on Friday afternoon is they're confused. They're
understand.
confused, like, you know what I mean? But this
Well, I
one,
would be confused if I saw that the knee was in the manual. I would be very confused because then,
exactly,
then
exactly.
what do you expect him to do?
And what's funny is, they were questioned extensively. There was a pool of 130 jurors, and they were questioned extensively. And what is funny about these jurors is they kind of instinctively knew how to answer some of those questions in order to get on the jury. So this one is a professional white male. I see him wearing like a shirt and tie. He's quite well dressed. He has a college degree. He has a high maintenance wife. And he is being very quiet about being on the jury. Only his immediate work colleague knows, and his immediate family. As far as like friends and other family members, they have no idea, because he's actually quite frightened that he's on the jury. He's scared that he will be threatened, that his family will be threatened. He doesn't know how it's going to go, although his mind is made up. He says guilty. He doesn't want to be there. He's not being attentive to the information. He doesn't need to. He didn't watch the videos beforehand, and he often just sits in the courtroom just daydreaming about being on the golf course. He just wants to go home. He does not want to be there, and he is quiet. He doesn't socialize with the other jury members, and he will vote guilty just to get this over with and to go home. At the moment, he has not received any active threats against his life, but he believes this is a very volatile situation.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's interesting. So his mind is made up. And the reason his mind is made up is just because he's ready to go home. He's guilty. I just want to go home. I want to have a peaceful life. I want to have a quiet life. Now, there's a couple of jurors on here. There's one that, let me skip around here. And if anybody wants the full copies of my remote viewing of the jury, they can just email me at remoteviewingandbeyond@gmail.com. And I'm also on Patreon, remote viewing and beyond and it's like a little blue
Yeah,
logo.
I put the links in the description so people can just
Oh,
pull it.
great.
Yeah.
Now, this is our one right here. Now, this is very, very interesting. This is the only full Black female on the jury. And I pegged her to be in her late 50s, 60s. She's a mother, she's a grandmother. Her kids are grown. She does have grandchildren, and her children are successful. She worked very hard to keep them off the streets and out of trouble. She's a professional, or she was a professional. She has a good sense of humor and knows that her husband is at home glued to the television. She does go home and discuss the case with her family, even though she's not supposed to. But what I find interesting about her view is that she thinks Floyd was a bad man. Even though
That's
she is a
interesting.
Black female, she thinks he's a bad man. He's the very person that she kept her children away from when they were growing up. She didn't want them around druggies. She didn't want them around gangsters and rappers and people in that. She works hard. She had her
So she's
children
leaning
involved.
towards not guilty.
She is leaning towards not guilty. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is the fact that what's so interesting is the fact that she's the only Black female on the jury. So everybody's probably thinking, oh, she's going to go guilty. But actually, as of Friday evening, when I viewed her, she's leaning towards not guilty. And I'm sure that, the prosecution thinks, yeah, definitely a guilty verdict from her because she's a Black female, right? There's another Black male. Now he is interesting. Excuse me. He is very interesting. He likes the easy life. He is not, he stays out of trouble. And this one is in his, I would say, 40s. This male is in his 40s. Oh, the nurse is interesting too. She sits there like she's all superior to everybody on the jury because she knows all the medical information they're talking about. The nurse is very interesting. She sits there with a smug look on her face. So the Black male, going back to him, his mind is not made up, right? And again, when I viewed the prosecution, like, how do you feel about this juror? They think, oh, it's home and dry with the Black jury members. But he is feeling very conflicted. He is questioning his parental figures. And he's actually having this internal war. He's wondering if it would be disrespectful for him to vote not guilty. And he sits there like his days on the jury are filled in moral quandary. He's never had a negative interaction with the police. He has a very low tolerance level for Black males that are troublemakers. He stays away from them. He's very into athletic, keeping fit, sports, and he has a mixed bag of friendships. He's got some white friends, some Black friends. He doesn't really care as long as they like the same sports that he likes. He's really gung-ho for sports. He does have affiliations in the Minneapolis Police Department, and I feel like they're linked to the sports or being athletic. Mm-hmm. And he does not listen to the news whatsoever. He stays away from it at all costs because it's bad for his soul. He just wants to enjoy his life. He has a lot of respect for his mother, and his mind is not made up, but his heart is telling him to put in a guilty verdict. So his mind is saying, not guilty, the police are just doing their job. But because of the influence of his mother and the fact that he is, tied to being Black, obviously, his family are Black, he feels like in his heart, he should put in a guilty verdict. And he just believes that if you stay out of trouble, you won't bring about problems in your life. He's not deeply religious. He does not attend church, and he does not attend any events within the Black community. So again, this is another Black male on the jury. He's older, and his mind is saying not guilty, but his heart is saying, I owe it to my family. I owe it to my mother to vote guilty because of the struggles that she endured in her life. So do you have any questions?
I just think that the whole thing it's kind of like what Floyd said, that it's just going to change everything, and it's a shame
Hmm.
that one guy has to pay the price for that. But
Yeah.
reform for control and power is always a good thing. So
Yeah.
wish for the
Oh, I have to tell you about this juror. I'm sorry if I'm boring you all, but this is funny.
hmm
There's a white female on the jury, and she has no respect for the police. She played that down in her questioning, right?
yeah.
She believes the police interferes with people's lives. I think she smokes marijuana, and she thinks that people should just get on with their life without being harassed. She does not like government either, so she's completely anti-establishment. um I feel like if she does have children, she's not very close to her children. She just does what she wants to do. Her kids kind of raise themselves. um she does not have a serious boyfriend or relationship. She has open relationships. I feel like this is a bit of a hellraiser. I don't know why I see the Hells Angels when I look at her. She distrusts men, and she would never commit to a male ever again. Kids are a total drag to her lifestyle, and she is adamant that Chauvin should be jailed. She does not see anything wrong with Floyd's behavior. She does not care why the police were called in the first place, and believes that Floyd may have just used the fake bill as he'd fallen on hard times. She doesn't see anything wrong with people taking drugs. She's guilty, guilty, guilty. And the last statement she made in the viewing was, "Cops are pigs." she's she's hardcore. This one, she's a hellraiser.
You see the jurors in the public, or you're just remote viewing them individually?
No, you can't. Nobody knows what they look like. No, I'm just remote viewing each one individually. I
All right.
didn't remote view it as an entity because I felt like I just wanted to see what each one thinks. Now there's another one here.
You've written all these descriptions
Mm-hmm.
on each one. So if they want to
Yeah.
contact you, they can, or get on your Patreon and they can find.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But
Cool.
the
Yeah.
one solid, possibly not guilty. I'll finish up with it.
Yeah.
These last two. There's a social worker on there that is so, oh my God. She's going for guilty because she doesn't think anybody should ever be put in cuffs, and she thinks that everybody can sort out any problems by talking it through. She's very naive. She's very young. She's trying for a baby. I feel like she's just out of college. She's definitely going guilty. Um, there's a there's a white male who is a Republican on the jury. He believes hard work always pays off. He does not have any time for addicts or criminals. He believes in law enforcement. He supports them, but he is confused as to why Chauvin remained on top of Floyd for so long. So this one is opposite to the black male, where the black male is saying not guilty in sorry, where he's having that heart mind conflict. This one is as well. He's saying consciously, I know that I should support the police, but his heart, because he seems to be a little religious, actually, probably medium on the religion scale, and excuse me, his heart is telling him he's guilty. So, and the last one, sorry, just the last one is this young she's funny, this young multiracial female. She's told everybody she's on the jury. She is texting, talking to her friends, and she is going towards guilty, but not based upon the evidence, based upon the peer pressure from her friends. She believes in defunding the police. She actually has no idea what defunding the police means, but it sounds good to her. She's very naive again. And because of the case, she's actually thinking of becoming a social worker or a high school counselor to get people off drugs, to help people before they get as far as Floyd has gone with the drug use. So again, she's saying, I'm going to convict, but based upon peer pressure and the youth vote in America. She's not really paying much attention to the evidence.
Hmm. It's a shame. Well, I think that we're all part of one human race,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever we can do to mitigate the consequences and the negativity is ultimately the best goal, because either way, either way it's harsh, either way it's negative, you know,
Mm-hmm.
guilty, not guilty, it's a problem either way. And
It is. It is.
ultimately the lessons learned from Floyd and Chauvin would be, you know, their lifetime lessons would be the ultimate goal. Like, okay, what were they supposed to achieve? What were they supposed to overcome? What were they supposed, and then what are we as viewers supposed to take
Mm-hmm.
away from stuff like that? What are we supposed to achieve? What are we supposed to overcome? You know, in many ways, it points towards the direction of bringing us together, you know, with the idea of
Mm-hmm.
Black Lives Matter, I can't breathe, less oppression from a police. And in a weird way, it creates division because the martyr that they use is like this criminal drug addict, and it's hard for people to get behind
Mm-hmm.
mentally. So to overcome those things as a viewer, you have to tell yourself we're all just humans. We're all humans with our flaws and our imperfections, and we need to really see through it in a way where we can climb and rise above and unify,
Yeah.
you know, and unify, truly unify in such a way where these things just don't happen and they never get to this much division.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that to me is the takeaway, and it's hard to see it that way because I
Yeah.
can't relate. I think I just can't relate on this entire issue. That's, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to because but I feel like it's so political, so messy,
Mm-hmm.
so ugly. I mean, how can you say not guilty with everyone wanting him to be guilty? Because it's just more of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
A case should never be that. A case should be 100% removed from that kind of pressure. I mean, the second I just heard that there was a training manual where you got to have their knee on their neck,
Mm-hmm.
what more do you want? He's trained to do that. He's supposed to do that. He would be in trouble if he didn't do that. If he
And
put him in a chokehold, they'd point to that. No, you're supposed to put the knee on the neck. I mean, it's
mm,
it's just this. It's an impossible
it's
predicament, you know.
it's so gray. It's all so gray. I mean, to the point where when he's in cuffs and they're trying to put him in the vehicle, they actually have a clip of an officer's body cam. They're like, why are you foaming at the mouth? And you can see there's like white stuff coming out of his mouth, right? And his girlfriend testified that when he overdosed a couple months prior to this incident, he was foaming at the mouth. And so all it is so gray.
It
It,
could have agitated his drug.
mhm.
You know, it could have been like
Yeah,
worked
good.
together, made it more sensitive, where a normal person would have been okay. But you know,
Yeah. I mean, who's to say
this,
what mechanisms kicked in the body? They did have this Dr. Tobin, this Irish guy who was great, who demonstrated like different movements that Floyd was making. Was, you know, when he raised his shoulder, that was when he was gasping for air. That, and it was excellent testimony. But then the defense comes along and says, okay, but are these same, airways being cut off, when somebody's having a drug overdose, there, it's their respiration. He's saying, and my husband and I, because my husband is an ex-cop, right? We've been in these situations so many times before. I mean, listen, we were in the police in a city of 10 million plus people. So if you think it's quiet, it's not. And so he counted, this Dr. Tobin counted the respirations, and he says this is not somebody who is having a fentanyl overdose because of the respiration rate. But then both my husband and I looked at one another like, okay, but when you're stressed, when you're under stress and the body is under stress, your respiration rate increases. So, who's to say whether the respiration rate was normal, because actually it was lower due to the fentanyl. When they first approached his vehicle, he was passed out at the wheel. He was leaning on the wheel and passed out. And I, and I'll tell you, do you remember the singer George Michael?
no.
Come on, Wham, wake me up before you go.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, George Michael. Come on, I'm showing my age now.
Hmm.
But I'm in London one night and we see this brand spanking new Mercedes on the CCTV, 3 o'clock in the morning, weaving all over the road. He's the only person on the road. He gets to the red light and he passed out at the wheel with his foot on the brake, right? So I'm watching the CCTV. We call a unit, and my colleague who was working with me, he's very cockney. He's like, Liz, you know what, mate? That is bloody George Michael. It came back. We did a name check on the plate because we zoomed in on the plate on the CCTV. It came back George Michael, and it came back a George Stephanopoulos or whatever, because he's Greek. And I said, that's not bloody George Michael. He goes, Liz, it is, I promise you. So we sent units to the scene. He's passed out at the wheel. They had to put his vehicle in park, put the brake on, turn his vehicle off. And when he got out of the vehicle, he was foaming at the mouth, and he was on a combination of drugs and alcohol. And he's completely out of it. And, but the custody sergeant, when I called to see if there was room in custody for George Michael, they had him in cuffs, right? But in England, they cuff in the front. They don't normally cuff in the back. They only cuff in the back under extreme circumstances. They cuff in the front. And also the cuffs are different too. But anyway, so he's cuffed in the front. The custody sergeant, I'm like, Sarge, we got to bring George Michael in. He goes, you're not bringing him in here. I am not being responsible for that. I am not dealing with the media. I am not dealing with the paparazzi. Take him to the hospital. So we had to call an ambulance. He goes, if he dies in my custody with the amount of drugs and alcohol he's on, and the fact that he's foaming at the mouth, he goes, I am in so much trouble. I do not want him here. So we called an ambulance. He was compliant. He didn't fight the police at all. He was very nice. And they put him in the ambulance, and he went to the hospital. So, I mean, why did they call an ambulance for George Floyd? Was it because he was foaming at the mouth? Was it because they suspected a drug overdose? Or, who knows? It's such a gray area. It's an interesting case. The world is watching. It's interesting. And these jurors, they're funny. It's funny when you go in and you remote view them, and they all have their own idiosyncrasies. They all have their own personalities. They all have their own opinions. And you realize that these opinions, when you start delving in deep, it's all based on an entire life so far of circumstances and predicaments that they've grown up in. So it's just so interesting. I love it.
I know you do.
I love it. I
All right,
love it. I think
I'm
it's
gonna
great.
pause the recording on this one. Let's see here. I'm gonna stop.
Did you like that?